Good morning, and thank you to the organizers for including this presentation in the schedule today. My name is Juniper Quin. I hold a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Alberta in Alberta, Canada, and I'm currently in the process of a diploma in addictions counseling from the Kelowna College of Professional Counseling in British Columbia, Canada. Today, it is my great privilege to present to you in my role as a research associate with Cosmointel on the topic of Faradarmani and Psymentology, exploring the potential of Taheri consciousness fields in complementary and alternative medicine. Not only am I particularly excited to speak on this topic today due to my academic interest, but also the immense personal benefits that I have received from both of these complementary and alternative medicines. All theories and discoveries that I will discuss today were originally authored by Dr. Mohammad Taheri, and I will introduce him more presently. Dr. Mohammad Taheri is a visionary, innovator, and founder of the School of Irfani Kehani Halqa. With over 40 years of experience in education and research on T-consciousness. He is known for his numerous theories, including T-consciousness fields, or TCFs, and the Cosmic Consciousness Network, known as the CCN. Taheri has received numerous honorary degrees and awards for his complementary and alternative medicines, Faradarmani and Psymentology, which have a wide variety of applications in the physical and non-physical aspects of human health. He is also the founder of Cosmointel Incorporated, the main monitoring center for TCF studies, and the Journal of Cosmointel, the first scientific journal in T-consciousness research. So a brief roadmap of what I'll cover in this presentation today. I'll introduce you a little bit to the complementary and alternative medicines, Faradarmani and Psymentology. And I'll further explain their nature by discussing what T-consciousness is, as well as introducing the software Primacy perspective, the Cosmic Consciousness Network, and Taheri consciousness fields. I'll then circle back around to Faradarmani and Psymentology in a little more detail, explain the mechanisms by which they function through the T-consciousness bond theory, and also the treatment process. And we'll wrap up with an overview of the research and a Q&A if we have time. As I mentioned, Faradarmani and Psymentology are two Iranian complementary and alternative medicines that are branches of the School of Irfani Kehani Halqa. There are over 1 million practitioners worldwide today. Faradarmani primarily addresses physical issues, while Psymentology primarily addresses mental and psychological issues. And yes, both of these disciplines can be applied as complementary medicines and alternative medicines. The process by which healing occurs via the application of Taheri consciousness fields in both of these approaches will be explained presently. One of the most mysterious, elusive, and fascinating topics facing humanity today is the subject of consciousness. The nature of consciousness and its place in science has received much attention in the 21st century. It's presently one of the most widely discussed topics in psychology, philosophy, and neuroscience today. Dr. Taheri's unique and groundbreaking discovery of Taheri consciousness fields and subsequent ongoing research offers humanity a new understanding of consciousness. Thus, the term Taheri consciousness or T-consciousness was coined. The major difference between Taheri consciousness theory and other theoretical concepts about consciousness is related to the practical application of Taheri consciousness fields and the positive effects of these fields upon both living and non-living aspects of our world, including humans, animals, plants, microorganisms, molecules, cells, particles, etc. T-consciousness is neither matter nor energy. However, under standard experimental design conditions, the effect of T-consciousness fields upon the physical world, and by physical world we mean energy and matter since electrons have mass, the effect of T consciousness fields upon the physical world can generate reproducible laboratory results consistent with the scientific method. Let's look at some more key concepts about T consciousness. T consciousness, energy, and matter are considered by Dr. Taheri to comprise the three foundational elements of our universe. Matter, energy, and T consciousness can be converted into each other. And T consciousness can influence time and space, though it is not constrained by them. So we have a simple schematic on the right-hand side of this slide, and it just shows a bidirectional relationship between each of these three components of T consciousness, energy, and matter in our universe. In order to further understand the nature of T consciousness, let's look at something called the software primacy perspective, which is unique to Dr. Taheri's work. The software primacy perspective states that the physical aspects of the universe, matter and energy, can be considered the hardware of existence. T consciousness can be considered as the software of existence. The software guides the behavior and characteristics of the hardware. So in general, we can say that every particle or component of our universe is governed by a software. Now, because the software informs the behavior and characteristics of the hardware, and we can obviously see by simply looking around us that our universe is full of many different types of hardware, many different types of forms and behavior. We then must consider that there are many different softwares or subcategories of T consciousness in our universe. And this concept is articulated with the idea of the Cosmic Consciousness Network, or CCN. So the CCN is the interconnected network of intelligence, information, or T consciousness that governs the universe, and it can also be known as the cosmic internet. The CCN can be thought of as the consciousness of the whole, and its subsets as the consciousness of the parts. So simply stated, the CCN is a way to articulate the T consciousness that was introduced in the previous slide. And then there are subsets or categories of consciousness that are distinct and that are organized in an interrelated network within the Cosmic Consciousness Network. One subset of the Cosmic Consciousness Network has been identified as a Taheri consciousness field. And in fact, the Taheri consciousness field, it's plural, Taheri consciousness fields. It's a category of consciousness that is a subset of the Cosmic Consciousness Network, or the T consciousness that governs our universe. In order to better understand what a Taheri consciousness field is, we can look to some other fields in our universe, like gravitational fields or magnetic fields. Every particle in our universe is under the influence of various fields, such as these, and they behave differently when exposed to these fields. So the hardware of a particle, the physicality of a particle, behaves differently or responds to the presence of a gravitational field or a magnetic field. Similarly, a Taheri consciousness field, or a TCF, can influence the software of that particle. And the software of that particle can in turn influence the behavior and characteristics of the hardware. So Taheri consciousness fields are a subset of the CCN, and they also have an effect upon the physical world. There are various TCFs with different functionalities, and some TCFs, when applied to living organisms, have been observed to initiate restorative, balancing, and correcting mechanisms in the organism. So as you see in the diagram on the left, I've added a subset of the Cosmic Consciousness Network that I have labeled the Faradarmani CF, or the Faradarmani consciousness field. Faradarmani and Psymentology both make use of TCFs to affect the software of living beings without direct human intervention. So based on the software primacy perspective, there are two approaches to this T-consciousness intervention in the context of human health. We have the software-hardware intervention, which we call Faradarmani, and we have the software-software intervention, which we call Psymentology. And I'll start discussing these in a moment in more detail, but before I go on, I think it's worthwhile to discuss how we define illness in this discipline. So human beings, we are complex entities composed of a myriad of interconnected physical and non-physical components. So the physical components of the human being are things like organs, limbs, cells, mitochondria, systems like the immune system, the circulatory system, etc. And the non-physical aspects of the human being include things like thoughts, emotions, perceptions, and memory, and the like. Each physical and non-physical aspect of the human being has a software associated with it. And a defect in any part of this infinitely complex system of softwares can lead to the onset of an illness, physical, mental, and/or psychological. So let's talk about Faradarmani in a little more detail. Faradarmani, as a complementary and alternative medicine, applies the Faradarmani consciousness field to affect software repair in living beings. Subsequently, the hardware, the physical parts like organs and bones and tissue, are improved. Faradarmani applications include, but are not limited to, the following condition types: physical, psychological, psychosomatic, and mentosomatic. Psymentology involves applying several specific TCFs to the subject as needed to correct the software of the non-physical components of the human being, which are the mind and the psyche. So it should be noted that in conventional psychology, the mind and psyche, which are emotions, are not considered as separate operations. In Psymentology, the mind and psyche, while interrelated, are completely separate softwares with completely different functions, and they also have completely distinct disorders. So Psymentology can be used to treat the following condition types: mental disorders, as well as mystery or undefined disorders. One of the examples I like to use for mystery disorders is sleep paralysis, which continues to remain a mystery to conventional science and medical science today. In order to understand how the application of a Taheri consciousness field to a living being actually functions, the mechanism by which it functions, we can look at T-consciousness bond theory for an explanation. A T-consciousness bond, which is a non-material consciousness-based bond, a T-consciousness bond is formed when a connection is established between the T-consciousness of the whole and the T-consciousness of the parts. So in other words, a T-consciousness bond is formed when a connection is established between the cosmic consciousness network and a part or a subset of the cosmic consciousness network, in this case, the subject or the patient being treated. This connection between the consciousness of the whole, the CCN, and the consciousness of the part, the subject, that connection is made possible through a TCF, through a Taheri consciousness field, which affects the software programs of the subject, thereby initiating an optimization, a healing process. The connection is initiated by a qualified and trained individual known by turns as a TCF user, an announcer, or a Faradarmani. TCFs can be announced from short range, meaning the TCF user and subject are physically in the same location, or at a distance. This is possible due to T-consciousness not being restricted by time or space. The TCF user initiates the T-consciousness bond through nazar, which is a precognitive event, or a 0-second glance, or a momentary attention. toward the TCF and the subject being treated. So let's look at a schematic to better understand what's happening here. So we have the TCF user or announcer on the right-hand side of this diagram, and the TCF user announces a TCF for the subject. So on this diagram, we have the subject as the blue circle on the right-hand side. Now, in order to initiate a consciousness bond between the cosmic consciousness network, the red dot at the top of this red circle, and the subject down here, in order to initiate a T consciousness bond between the consciousness of the whole, the CCN, and the consciousness of the part, the subject, all that the TCF user does is they announce a specific TCF, they announce a specific Taheri consciousness field for the subject being treated. So only those two things, the subject being treated and then the TCF that's being applied to the subject. And that announcement is called Nazar. It happens in 0 time. It's a split second. It can also be known as a precognitive event. As soon as the TCF user announces the TCF for the subject, that is the end of their participation in the process. And what you see in this diagram is something that happens automatically. So when we say that a T consciousness bond is formed between the consciousness of the whole and the consciousness of the parts, we can look to this diagram for a little more explanation. So we have the green box on the bottom of this diagram to the left, labeled as the cosmic consciousness network. And then we have the T consciousness bond represented in the middle. The blue boxes on the right-hand side are examples of the types of consciousness or the softwares of living beings. So we have the consciousness of the DNA, consciousness of the cell, consciousness of the tissue. Of course, human beings contain all of these various subcategories of consciousness within our being. And then the gray boxes on the left here are examples of the types of consciousness represented by the world of matter, the non-living world of matter. So consciousness of the neutron, consciousness of the elementary particle, etc. So in simple terms, when a T consciousness bond is formed, there's a connection that is established between the cosmic consciousness network, which is the consciousness of the whole, the T consciousness governing the universe, and all of the subsets. So what does this treatment process look like in a clinical setting or a laboratory setting? So when a T consciousness bond is established, the cosmic consciousness evaluates or scans the software components of the subject, initiating a process of recovery, correction, and orientation. A discharge or externalization process may accompany the software correction. So the subject may experience sleepiness, energy waves in their body, warmth, tingling, sharp pain or sensation at the site of new or old injuries that haven't been fully healed, and or symptoms of illnesses that have not been fully resolved in the subject. Other phenomena, such as seeing colors, hearing sounds, having non-contextual emotional experiences, and receiving profound insights may also occur. So the diagram on the left is a visual representation of treatment with the Faradarmani consciousness field without the stage of discharge. So this discharge may or may not occur, and treatment can still be achieved. So on the bottom left of the far left diagram, we have a subject presenting with hypothetical illness with various symptoms. The Faradarmani CF consciousness field is applied, the symptoms improve, and then we can say that the subject is cured or treated. Faradarmani treatment with the stage of discharge looks something like this, the diagram on the right. Subject presents with an illness and associated symptoms. the Faradarmani consciousness field is applied, the symptoms temporarily get worse, and then they resolve to a state of treatment. And it should be noted that there are 9 distinct discharge patterns across physical, mental, psychological, psychosomatic, and mentosomatic conditions, and they can be found and explored more on Cosmointel.com, and I'll leave the resource toward the end of this presentation. Because conventional science is limited to the study of matter and energy, Taheri coined the term ScienceFact in 2020 to describe a specific approach to the scientific method for the purpose of studying the effects of TCFs on matter and energy. To date, there have been over 60 scientific studies investigating the effects of T-consciousness fields on matter and energy, encompassing human subjects, animals, plants, microorganisms, molecules, cells, and particles. One study has recently been peer-reviewed and indexed, and many more have been conducted by researchers respected in their fields. Dr. Mohammad Taheri welcomes fellow researchers to collaborate on future studies necessary for a thorough understanding of TCFs and their potential applications in medicine and beyond. The study of TCFs in an experimental design are quite interesting. It's a very particular approach to studying consciousness. So I want to take a moment to explain that. When studying the effects of TCFs in a laboratory setting, the folks at Cosmointel use a double-blind observation procedure. So the researchers observing and recording subject responses are actually unfamiliar with the T-consciousness intervention method. They will coordinate with an interventionist or a TCF user through the Cosmointel Center, who will announce the TCF being studied upon the research subject at a distance. And for both control and study groups in any given experimental design, acronyms are selected and decided upon between the interventionist or the TCF user and the researcher on the ground as an additional control for bias. The sample and control groups are observed and examined simultaneously. And finally, the researchers performing the initial analysis of data will be unfamiliar with the details and mechanism of the T-consciousness intervention, again, to prevent researcher bias. Most criticism about complementary therapy is the lack of scientific research. In order to be accepted, academic studies using different study designs are necessary, or several study designs. Since one critical objection occurring when human beings are treated with complementary therapies is the placebo response, biochemical plant-based studies can be a suitable method to clarify the phenomenon. In the research presented here, the Faradarmani consciousness field was applied on a specific type of wheat, and the results of this study suggest that the Faradarmani consciousness field is effective as a qualitative intervention strategy to withstand salt stress in plants by increasing the contents of chlorophyll, antioxidant enzyme activities, and decreasing MDA content under salinity. So over the past 40 years, there have been many case studies and independent reports from practitioners of Faradarmani and Psymentology. And we're now moving into exploring biochemical or plant-based studies so that we can confirm these self-reported results and case studies on more simple organisms like plants. For your further reading and personal interest, I really recommend that you go and look at the Journal of Cosmointel. There have been, I think, 9 editions with a 10th one coming out soon. And there are some titles which are particularly relevant to these 2 CAMs that I discussed today. So Volume 1, number 1, focuses on the T consciousness fields and their effect on the COVID-19 virus. The second publication looks at T consciousness fields and their effect on the brain and nervous system. The fifth publication looked at the effect of T consciousness on the mind and the psyche, so it focuses on Psymentology. The sixth publication looked at T consciousness fields and their application in cancer research. And the ninth publication is focused on the experimental investigation of T consciousness information transfer in water molecules and living cells, and it introduces a concept called biological dark energy. These are just some resources if you want to further investigate or reach out and contact Cosmointel, the Journal of Cosmointel. If you're interested more in how the T consciousness bond theory operates, that information is explained in a lot of depth in the material that you can find in Taheri Academy. Interested researchers, if anyone here wants to reach out and participate in some of the ongoing research of Cosmointel, you can email manager@journalofcosmointel.com. Taheri Academy material, it's mostly in Farsi, but there is some English material being translated, and there is more and more being worked on every day. The official website of Mohammad Ali Taheri is here, and he also has an official YouTube channel at Mohammad Ali Taheri Official. And that YouTube channel contains Farsi as well as English content, and I believe there's also some French and German content there as well. Thank you very much for your time today, and if we have any time remaining, we can open the floor to Q&A.
Thank you for your informative talk, Juniper. If there are any queries, please to put up your questions.
Okay. I'm just going to go back one slide here. I apologize for the strange formatting. I'm not quite sure how that happened, but if anyone wants to take a quick screenshot of these resources and the email address of Cosmointel, we'd love to hear from you, and we would love to have your participation. And if you're interested in any of the results of Faradarmani and Psymentology research, and even if you're skeptical, especially if you're skeptical, we really want to hear from you, because participating in this research is a great opportunity to see the results firsthand, especially with the double-blind setup of the research design. So we'd love to hear from you. And with that, I will sign off, and thank you again very much for your time.